Hey everyone, I'm Wishlyst, also known as Wish on the Beat. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm a songwriter, music producer, and instrument player. I used to be a classical cellist full-time, and now I'm Wishlyst. Today, I want to talk about imposter syndrome because it's such a big deal in the creative community. I already did a podcast episode about imposter syndrome, so if you like this video and you want to hear me talk even more about it, you can check out my podcast, Words with Wishlyst. It's here on YouTube and also on Spotify or wherever you get podcasts. But this video is going to be a little bit more kind of practical and just go right to some of my tips as opposed to the podcast where it was more kind of free form. But all of my videos and my podcast are totally unscripted, so it's just going to be like a natural conversation about all of these things. I did boil it down to 7 steps that I want to go over, but we're just going to be here talking about imposter syndrome. So if you haven't heard about what imposter syndrome is, it's basically a term that people are using all the time now to just kind of sum up feeling insecure in whatever it is you do and feeling like you're not worthy in whatever it is that you do. And we tend to hear it in music, in the arts, in creative situations, but it's also very much a thing just in real world life and jobs. Feeling like an imposter can really happen anywhere. And it seems more and more like people really identify with this imposter syndrome, like it really sums up their insecurities really well. And I kind of wanted to tackle it and break it apart because I really think, especially as creatives, it's so important for us to feel confident in ourselves, and it's really imperative to what it is that we do in the world to have confidence in our vision, in our product, in our skills. So imposter syndrome really serves no purpose at all. So that's why I wanted to go in kind of hard with a little bit of a tough love approach to really break down imposter syndrome so we can all overcome it. Now, don't get me wrong, I totally sympathize with feeling insecure. I've been there, we've all been there. It's natural to have insecurities, especially if you're pushing yourself really hard and you're trying to do something new. Feeling insecure or uncertain is a natural part of the process, but we don't have to overly identify with these insecurities and go so far as saying we feel like an imposter in what we do. So if you are someone who's suffering from imposter syndrome or you resonate with it, let's get into these tips and help you overcome it. So the first tip is to know yourself. Now, I know that's a tall order, and I do have a podcast episode on this too. It was actually the first episode of my podcast called Know Thyself, which is all about self-discovery and self-identity. So if this is an area where you struggle, I definitely recommend checking out that podcast episode. But basically, if we don't want to feel like an imposter, we have to know who we are first. And before we start worrying about how the world is perceiving us, how our work is being received, we have to be right with ourselves. There's no way to skip that step. You can't start putting yourself out there or putting your work out there when you're not really certain who you are, or else the foundation of everything that you do is just not even a foundation. It can't support what you're doing. And while you may have, some good moments or some success here and there, I think what all of us are going for in creative careers and a creative life is longevity. And if you don't have a solid foundation, you're not going to have longevity. So what you need for that is to know yourself. So know what your values are, know what you are feeling drawn to and what feels important to you. Of course, we are going to grow and evolve and change, but you want to start from a place of self-knowledge when you're doing anything. Anyone who's had a creative project for a number of years knows that evolution and changing and growth is a part of it. So I'm not saying know who you are and only stick to that for the rest of your projects. I'm just saying that you don't want to try things with the reverse approach of what are other people doing? What do people like? What's successful? Okay, maybe I'll try that. Okay, maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll try that. That's not really starting from any kind of foundation. That's just letting yourself be pulled by the currents of trends and other people's opinions. And if you're letting that be the current that drives you, you're never going to understand where you are. You're never going to feel like you belong where you are. So there's nothing wrong with trying things and experimenting. That's actually a part of coming to know yourself. So I'm not saying you're expected to know this right off the bat, but you want to really spend that time with yourself before you're worried about the public perception, before you're worried about how people feel about your work. Make sure you're right with yourself, you know who you are, you know what you want to be making, and that vision is really clear. It can always evolve and it can always change, but you don't want to start from a place of thinking about the reception before you even think about what you're creating in the first place. Knowing who you are and feeling secure in that identity is what's going to help you navigate all the challenges that come your way, because Being a creative is not simple and it's not easy. So you need to have that really strong sense of self to carry you through all those ups and downs that are definitely going to come your way if you stay on this path. The second tip is to represent yourself honestly. Social media has made the world so weird. I mean, I love social media. I was on social media before it was called social media, MySpace, LiveJournal, whatever it was back in the day. I loved expressing myself and putting myself out there on a public platform. It just always felt natural to me. I loved connecting with my friends that way. I was always like getting my friends referral codes to get them on all the sites and things that I was on. I think social media is a wonderful thing at its core, but it's become toxic in many ways, like many things do over time. And now people are so concerned about how they're perceived in their social media or how their engagement is, their likes, their follower count, all this stuff has put the focus on all the wrong things. Who even cares about followers anymore when it's so easy to buy fake followers on pretty much every platform? I get a million DMs every day from these scammy places that, you send them $30 and they'll give you 10,000 followers. So it's like, who cares your follower count anymore when you're comparing yourself to people who have fake followers anyway, or fake likes, or they're doing some really crowd-pleasing, disingenuous stuff just for the likes. Like, we can't be worried about that, because at the end of the day, if we are on social media to be a creative, to be an artist, to share our work, we can't get lost in this fake competition, fake posturing world that social media has become. So you want to make sure that you're representing yourself honestly, because if you get sucked into chasing trends or competition or trying to keep up with other people, you're probably going to find yourself starting to kind of stretch or exaggerate what it is that you're doing or how well you're doing. I mean, I know lots of people will go and make a post about how great their life is when they're actually really suffering, and they're doing that in an attempt to make themselves feel better. But feeling better comes from within, and there's nothing that we can do on the outside or that someone on the outside can do that can really make a true difference on the inside. So that's one of the major faults of social media, is we're going to it for the things that we need to be finding within. So that temptation makes people represent themselves in ways that aren't honest, because we consider it like putting our best foot forward, like we're just trying to make ourselves look good. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all edit our photos, and try to make things look as nice and as presentable as possible. But there's a difference between looking and presenting your best and stretching what is actually true. And a pet peeve of mine that I talk about a lot is people posting pictures with instruments that they don't play, just to look cool with the instrument. And of course, they're not going to write in the caption, "I don't actually play this instrument." They're just going to post the picture and let people assume that they do in fact play that instrument or whatever it is. And that's a very disingenuous approach. Now, that's just a small example, not saying that people who do that are bad people, but it's really important to understand how representing yourself honestly is going to affect how you feel about the public perception and your relationship to it. So if you want to feel secure in yourself, you want to make sure that what you're putting out there is accurate, because a very quick way to feel like an imposter is to kind of exaggerate or stretch the truth about who you are, put it out in the public, and then it kind of starts to settle in like, oh, that's not, I don't actually play that instrument, or I don't actually do that, or I'm not actually in a great place mentally. I just wrote a post pretending I was. That's going to start to weigh on you, and that's going to make the imposter syndrome compound. So don't get sucked into that instant gratification thinking that social media is going to help you feel better or more confident. It's not. It's a Band-Aid. It's a distraction from how you feel inside. So we're going to get into it in the next tips about how to work on the inside of how you feel, but represent yourself authentically and honestly so that you're not making it worse on yourself, feeling more like an imposter because you're presenting yourself inaccurately. Next tip. Understand that almost all things of value need to be earned. So there's no quick fix or just shortcut to get something of value. So whether it is you want some acknowledgement, you want people to respect you as a musician, you want to get some accolade, like whatever it is that you're trying to do, it's not something that you can just want in your heart and then express that you want it to the world and then it's going to come to you. Pretty much every accomplishment requires a lot of work, and it's easy to look at other people who have things and think, oh, that looks so easy for them, like it must be easy for me. But that's just not true. If what you're desiring is something of value, it's going to take work and it's going to take time. And there's nothing wrong with either of those things. Both of those things are helping prove your investment and your commitment to what you're doing, which helps strengthen your internal resolve to keep doing it, your confidence in yourself. So understand that things take time, and we should want them to take time. We should want them to take work, because that's how we know that they have value. Something that just falls in your lap, while that might be cool and great and fun, that doesn't have the same value as something we earn through hard work and sustained effort over time. Next tip, focus on your skills, not your likes. So again, back to getting too much on social media, which a lot of this is about, because I don't think that imposter syndrome existed in the same way before this social media world, where we're all posturing ourselves the best we possibly can on our various accounts. So if you want to feel confident in what you're doing, instead of looking at how many likes you have or how many followers you have and allowing that to tell you if you can be confident in it or not, focus on the skills that you're trying to develop, whether you're learning to play an instrument or you're starting to write your own music or you're doing some sort of visual art. Focus on really developing those skills in a real way. So not just doing it from time to time for fun. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing things for fun, but if you want to do something seriously and you want it to be even like your actual career, you have to be putting that time in to really, really develop your skills. And when you're working on developing your skills, you'll get the gratification of meeting your various goals. So let's say it's an instrument and you want to learn a few scales. It might take you a little bit of time, but once you learn those scales, you can say, oh, I learned that. That's a new skill that I have. Now I can play these 3 scales on guitar or whatever it is. And that's going to empower you and make you feel better at whatever it is you're trying to do. Whereas likes or good engagement is going to give you a quick hit of adrenaline or endorphins, like, oh wow, people like what I'm doing, this is great, I'm good, oh my God. It's not really sustainable, because then when your next post doesn't perform as well, then you're like, oh, I suck, nobody likes me. It's just like, you cannot base how you feel about yourself based on these external factors. Again, set your goals for yourself, tangible goals that are related to the skills and related to what you're trying to do, so that when you meet that goal, you can say, I did that, I met that goal. That is me getting closer to my longer term goals. That is me becoming more of a real guitarist, a real songwriter, a real whatever it is you're trying to do. You're actually getting closer to really being that thing when you work on your skills and you focus on your skills, as opposed to focusing on what everybody thinks about your skills. Next tip, your self-esteem is your responsibility. We cannot look to our social media following or even our friends or our family to fulfill our self-esteem. Now, of course, we want to receive love from our friends and family and support, and we should all be so lucky to have that. Sometimes we don't, though, and that isn't an excuse for our self-esteem to just be in the gutter. Now, I know I'm making this sound really simple and easy, and I know it isn't, especially for people who really struggle with self-esteem and self-worth. But for every single individual, whether it came naturally to you or not, to be confident, self-esteem has to come from within. So if you feel like you're someone who struggles with your self-esteem and your self-worth, it's even more imperative that you focus inward and not outward, because outward, like I said earlier, is going to pull you in the tides and the current of whatever other people say and think. And that's not what you want to be defining your self-esteem on. So I think a great way to build your self-esteem is similar to the last tip, working on your skills and making goals for yourself that are attainable goals, so that when you achieve those goals, you can feel good about it. You can give yourself a pat on the back and acknowledge that you met a goal, and therefore that can help build your self-esteem and build your confidence. There are so many other ways to build your self-esteem. That's not what this video is about, but I think it's really important to make the point in this video that looking externally is not going to help, and it really is a band-aid and a distraction from how you actually feel within. So even if it feels really good to have a very successful post or video or song or whatever, it's not going to solve the internal issue. It's just going to distract you from it for however long that endorphin high lasts. And then it's going to be back on you and you with yourself again. So really spending that time with yourself to learn to accept yourself, to celebrate your positive traits, to work on the traits about yourself that maybe you're not so fond of, doing all of that to build your self-esteem is up to you, not your friends, not your boyfriend, not your mom. All those people play in, but you really need to be focusing on yourself to build your own self-esteem and not everybody else's opinion. Next tip, and this ties into the last one, acknowledge your progress. So not even just meeting your goals, but acknowledge as you are improving. Part of being honest with ourselves is being kind to ourselves as well. I think a lot of us who are more driven and motivated, we want to just focus on what needs to be better, what we need to do next. I've definitely been guilty of that in the past. So I've made more of a point to myself over recent years that when I hit an accomplishment or when I just do something I said I was going to do and I follow through all the way, that I acknowledge that I take a moment to say, I did it. I finished that song is done and shipped off, or, whatever it is, so that we take that time to understand that all the work that we're doing, all the time that we're spending is paying off in one way or another. Because if we don't take that time to acknowledge our own hard work and what it's giving us, we're not going to want to keep doing it because we're going to say, oh, I still feel like crap about myself and this is still really hard. Like, why would I want to keep going? It's like, it's up to us to make sure that we are acknowledging the things that we're doing that make us feel good about ourselves and say, oh, wow, I proved to myself that I can really do this. Let me take a moment to say, hey, 2 weeks ago I couldn't play any scales, and now after practicing for 2 weeks, which felt like a long time, now I can play a couple scales. Like, take that time to pat yourself on the back so that you understand when you're on the grind, when you're working, when you're frustrated and you feel like you're never going to get there. You can remind yourself of those acknowledgments you gave yourself in the past, like, oh yeah, remember that time I was working really hard and it sucked, but then I eventually did the thing I was trying to do? And that will help motivate you to keep going. And then the last tip is things take time. So as much as we would love to say, I want to be a dancer and be a dancer by next week, that's just not how things work. And it's great to define what you want to focus on, but there's a whole journey involved. And I'm just really big on time and the value of time. And while some people can make a lot more happen in less time than other people, I'm kind of like that. Like, I'm someone who can really power through and learn a lot in a short amount of time. Even for my own rate, what I'm able to accomplish in 3 months' time versus a year's time is going to be very different. So also just understanding that you're not going to be able to achieve everything you want overnight. And ideally, if you're devoting yourself to some sort of passion and you want it to maybe become your career, you have to be okay with the long game. You have to be okay that things take a while, because ideally you want this in your life forever, or for a few decades at the very least. So you have to be okay with letting things take time and understanding that if you're doing a new endeavor and you're only a few months in, you're not going to be an expert. You're not going to be a master necessarily. And I think sometimes when people blow up too soon or they get a bunch of unexpected success earlier than, what they thought, it actually makes the imposter syndrome that much worse, because they think, oh my God, I just started doing this and now everybody loves it and that's great, but I'm so I don't even feel like I'm worthy of this yet. So there's value in things taking time, because it allows us to build that self-esteem, build our connection with our work, refine our skills, obviously, develop our own techniques and methods. It's just, time is irreplaceable. Nothing can substitute for time. So just accept that if you're in the earlier stages of something, you probably need more time before you're really at a place of, being a master or an expert, and that's okay. We all start as beginners. No matter what it is we're doing, we all start as beginners. So back to representing yourself honestly, make sure you're not in the beginning stages of something and trying to present yourself as an established, advanced person, because again, that's going to make you feel like more of an imposter. Be honest about where you're at. That doesn't mean you can't share yourself with the world. There's no gatekeeping, especially in these days. You can put yourself out there at any point. The first song you ever write can go up on YouTube and on Spotify if you want. So you don't have to hold yourself back if you want to be sharing yourself with people, but just be honest with yourself and with others about how far along you are on that journey, so that you're not kind of accidentally putting yourself in a position where it's not an accurate representation of who you are and where you're at. I hope these tips were helpful for you if you struggle with imposter syndrome or low self-esteem or just insecurity in whatever it is you're trying to do. I hope these tips give you a little bit of help. One other thing I want to say is that as someone who's been a professional, creative, artistic person for, I don't know, too many years, over a decade now, it's not for everybody, and that's okay. And because we're kind of living in a world of like, live your passion, live your dreams, which is a great sentiment, I think some people think if they're good at something creative or they enjoy something creative, that they need to find a way to make it their job because having a desk job is a bad thing or something like that. And I just have a different opinion on that. I've never had a desk job. I've never had a real job. I've had part-time jobs and stuff, but I've always been a full-time creative since I finished my schooling. And I have loved it and never looked back, but I know that I am a certain type of person and I'm built a certain type of way. And I know that a lot of other people would not be able to survive the type of life that I have. Making your creative passion into your job adds a lot of stress and a lot of uncertainty. And I'm not saying that to discourage people. I just think it's important that people know this going into it. When I tried to be a classical cellist, when I was 16 going on 17, getting ready for my college auditions, I was very far behind my peers. So I had a lot of teachers discourage me from becoming a classical cellist because I was too far behind. To say that to someone at 16 or 17, looking back, I think that's so irresponsible because you have so much time in your life to catch up if you're really driven. But I understand they were trying to protect me from a disappointing experience. And I don't think that that kind of one size fits all, you're not far along so you shouldn't do it thing works. I think it's much more about the individual and the personality, and you may not even know this for yourself until you try out being a creative. Lots of people go into music or the arts and then end up quitting when they realize, oh, this life is just not for me. So some people have to do the journey that way. But I just want to say to anyone who maybe has a creative passion that they love, but they're uncertain if they want to go into it professionally, just be reasonable with yourself as you try that out. If you find that maybe you just have a very sensitive ego, like maybe your self-esteem is okay, but you're very sensitive to criticism, or you just don't feel like you have the confidence to show up publicly all the time with what you're doing, that's okay. You have every right to not want to be in the spotlight or to find being in the spotlight too difficult on your ego. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean you're a broken person. I really think that not everybody is made to be in the creative field as a full-time profession. But what I do think is that creativity and the arts are for everybody, and no matter your ability level, you should have it in your life if you want to. You should enjoy it. It should provide fun and enrichment to your life. But that doesn't mean you have to make it your job or your full-time thing or anything like that. You can have art in your life in a beautiful way without it being your job. So I think that's just important to remember if you're really struggling with some of this stuff, that you don't have to be a professional, and that doesn't make you any less valid as an artist or whatever it is that you're doing. I love my creative life, but again, it works for me because of the type of person that I am. I'm not easily swayed by others. I've had so many haters and so much criticism throughout my whole musical life, still to this day, and it's never rattled me. I'm not going to say I enjoy getting mean comments or criticism, but it's never knocked me off course. But I know for a lot of other people it may, and you can't avoid criticism and negativity if you're going to be publicly putting yourself out there in a creative way. So it's important to understand that that's something that comes with a creative life, and you have to be ready to take that on. And that's why I think it's so important to address these 7 points of imposter syndrome so that you have your internal confidence, your internal vision, and you're not knocked off your path by when people inevitably say something that's mean to you about whatever it is you're doing. So I would love to hear from you guys if you experience imposter syndrome, how you feel about these tips. If you disagree with any of this stuff, let's debate it in the comments, whatever you want to do. I'm here to talk to you guys. I really hope you found this helpful. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe. You can check out all my music on Spotify under Wishlyst and Wish on the Beat. Again, the podcast is Words with Wishlyst, and I will see you guys next time.